Welcome to Redbeard Radio. I am Brian Keith, and we have today a burning question. Should you trademark your brand? Now, when people see me at conventions wearing my Keith Tartan kilt, they say, hey, it's the guy in the kilt. And people say, oh, it's Redbeard. People know me as Redbeard everywhere, but that's great for branding. But is that enough for legally defending myself? We're going to find out today with Suzi Hixon, a lawyer, got out of law school in 2003, has been dealing with these questions ever since then. Suzi's going to help us find out, should you trademark your brand? Suzi, welcome to Redbeard Radio.
Hey, Brian, thanks for having me.
I'm so excited because my brand is a lot to me. I literally have a red beard, and when I go walking around a convention and people don't see me in the kilt, every single time they say, where's the kilt? And I say, oh, I only wear a kilt on days that I'm speaking. So humble, you know?
Yeah.
But it means a lot, right? And people say, well, what if you ever shave off the beard? It's the whole thing. And so far, I know that trademarking is a hassle, and so I haven't dealt with that at all. But I sort of wonder, well, at what point am I big enough, or is the risk of someone else taking that name? Because it's not a really unique name, right? When I looked at Redbeard Radio, there's a whole bunch of things called Redbeard Radio. That's why I went with the domain redbeard.am. A joke for you older folks out there. Thank you. Redbeard.am, because there's so many Redbeard Radio, Redbeard Podcast, Redbeard whatever. So it's not super unique, but it is unique within my industry.
Sure.
And it's not obvious to me. Is there a revenue level? Is there a staffing level? Is there I'm trying to sell the company level? How does let's say a 6-figure business owner decide when to go pursue trademark?
Okay, so first of all, I want to commend you for even thinking about these concepts at this point. A lot of people don't even really think about it until they get a demand letter or a cease and desist letter. And they say, oh no, I don't want to get sued. What am I going to do? And they approach it from more of a reactive standpoint. So if you start looking at your trademarks from a proactive standpoint, you're already, I think, far ahead of the game. I also want to commend you for kind of developing a personal brand, right? And that's what you're doing by having the red beard and, having kind of that, are you Scottish? You have Scottish heritage?
So my name is Brian Keith, and the shield, back when I was a medieval sword fighter, the Keith shield that I carried in combat was been used by my family since roughly the 1040s. About 1,000 years of using this particular color pattern. The Keiths were the Earl Marshals of Scotland, that is the people in charge of the King's cavalry for 14 generations. And we were the last place to resist Oliver Cromwell when he conquered the entire rest of the country. So there's a very long lineage of red-bearded people.
Okay, I love that so much. That's so cool. And I love that you've done the genealogy. That's amazing. Regarding the trademark.
That's a different podcast, folks. Listen to any of the 100 whatever episodes to hear more about sword fighting. Today it's trademark law, a different kind of battle. Put on your armor, folks. Let's dive in.
Exactly. I mean, we're still going to battle, right? I mean, it's kind of...
Hopefully not. I don't want to, because here's the thing, Suzi. I don't want to be distracted, and I feel like so many of these legal things, now I, not being a lawyer and not being how I make money, are a distraction. Yeah. And what I want to do is create the best products in the world for my particular audience. And anything that distracts me from that is annoying, and I want to outsource or not do or ignore. And that's that's the bucket that trademarks fall into. Is I don't want to deal with it unless I really have to.
Right. And here's the thing. If you approach it from a more proactive standpoint, then you're not really like, you can hire a lawyer, right? And say, hey, handle this for me. And you won't really have to have a whole lot of headache with it, maybe just a little bit. But you'll know when you're ready. There's a few things to think about as a business owner. First of all, do you have that asset? And that is sort of that intangible, that intangible mark, right? Like the name, like the red beard or Nike, right? LaCroix, like for, sparkling waters. I'm looking here what's on my desk. Dior for lipsticks. And I'm just giving you some examples of trademarks. And trademarks are generally text terms. They can also be logos or designs. And you'll know when you start using these terms consistently in your business to name a product or service. So when do you really start thinking about that registration process? Well, the first thing you want to think about is, Are you ready, willing, and able to enforce the mark? Okay. And you might ask, like, what does that mean? There's sort of a part A to part B underneath that. You'll know when you have the financial means to enforce. And I generally tell people that, if you aren't ready, willing, and able, and I mean that financially, to enforce, it might not even really be necessary to file a registration for a registration. The registration ultimately gives you presumptive rights for that mark throughout the US. But if you're not ready, willing, and able to enforce it, then there may be no reason to file. Now, the second thing that I like people to think about is, are they emotionally tied to the mark? And what would they do if they saw someone else using the mark? Interestingly, I got an email this weekend from someone who said that they were sick to their stomach because they came across someone else using their mark. And I was like, it's time for you to really think about filing this mark. It really
Yeah.
would have been time to think about it before he found someone else, using the term. But, when you have that emotional attachment, it's time to really think about filing.
Well, so let's look at this. I use the phrase Redbeard across a bunch of different things. The
Mhm.
official company name is Redbeard Consulting LLC. At times, I've had training courses under the name Redbeard University. My mastermind group is called the Redbeard Accelerator. The podcast is called Redbeard Radio. My social media handle is Redbeard Brian. I own redbeard.eth, my crypto domain. So there's a whole bunch of Redbeard in there. But when
Yeah.
I think about what am I most attached to, well, the phrase Redbeard Brian, as far as I know, that's only me right now. That's why I have that on all
Mhm.
social media. Like that's me in a way that a particular individual project like Redbeard University, well, I'm actually scrapping that as I move that kind of content to a different website. So I'm not married to, and I certainly wouldn't want to be in court defending, oh, I said Redbeard University first.
Right.
Don't care
Right.
that much. But if Redbeard Brian, if someone else took that, especially if they were in the marketing space, then I'd be, or the entrepreneur mastermind space, would say, whoa there, buddy.
Yeah.
Hold on. So I feel more attachment to the name Redbeard Brian.
Right. Yeah. So that, like in your situation, I would suggest considering filing for Redbeard. Now, there's caveats, of course. Okay,
Yeah.
there's always exceptions, right? But your key core term is Redbeard, and you're using it across different. You're using it in several different ways, and of course, one of the caveats would be making sure that you're the first user for your specific service.
Mhm.
I would also say, hey, you should consider filing for Redbeard Brian, right? Because that really is, that's also, it sounds like you're very tied to that, because you're like, I would be really upset if I saw
It's
someone
my
else.
face.
It is you, right? And that's the other thing that some people might want to think about is, are you using any type of like stylization of your face? Are you using a beard? Are you using glasses, right? Like I see people like kind of using these little like icons in some ways that they're trying to use as a trademark. And a trademark is a source indicator, and it serves to distinguish you from other people or other businesses or brands. So, maybe someone else is already using the beard or the glasses, but those are just other examples of how people use icons or designs or logos as trademarks.
Well, I'll tell you this, Susie. When I was doing a logo exercise a couple years back, instead of going with my face or my beard, I decided to go with a graphic that I built based on my book, The Impact Framework, that talks about how to build out your message, platform, and tribe. And it's this like 3-part sort of circle thing with it's a stylized thing, right?
Yeah.
And that's the logo that you'll see on websites. You'll see it on social media art. I decided to not go with my face. Now I'm maybe rethinking that as I think more about branding. But at
Mm-hmm.
the moment, the closest thing I have to this is the universal. This means this is this particular person, this particular LLC put this out. There's that logo, which is different than the podcast cover, which is me wearing my Scottish tartan jacket, which is so how do I decide, okay, well, I have my face and then I have this logo, but I don't like the logo isn't exactly right. It's not like this is the next 10 years. In the reality of my branding is not as settled as Nike. How do I decide when to move forward with trademarking given that I'm not really settled and I know it costs some money?
Sure. Yeah. And the other thing is too, I think people need to think about is how long it takes to actually get a registration.
Well, that's let's ask that. How long does it take in your experience?
Um, what I'm experiencing right now is a file, and this is, and what I don't know when this will get published, but we're discussing in Q2 of 2022. Currently, right now, the wait times at the USPTO for the initial action on your application is 8 months, which is absolutely kind of absurd and breathtaking to me. And
That's mind-boggling.
I know, right? I don't know why. Like, I mean, they say they give different reasons why on the website. COVID, of course, had some kind of impact because a lot of the examining attorneys started working from home. But I kind of question, you know, there was already a handful of examining attorneys that were working at home, so they have a lot of applications.
Yeah. So what we're looking at is that if I see someone else using what I consider to be my mark and I
Mm-hmm.
want to be able to take enforcement action on them, I would have had to at least 8 months in the past file. Otherwise, I have to wait at least 8 months from today before I can even start to do anything to make them stop. Is that what I'm hearing? Very
It
roughly?
it depends.
Oh, you lawyers.
I know, right? It
That's
depends.
probably a really true answer, but it's still,
Yeah,
I wish there was simple answers in this area that I
there,
know nothing
I know,
about.
right? There are no simple answers, and I've heard it. I've listened to another one of your podcasts with a lawyer, and it's just like nothing is
Oh
simple,
yeah.
right? None of it's
Was
simple,
that
but
was that the was that the privacy episode?
yes, yeah. My
That
brain,
was also my brain broke like, oh man, I'm so ignorant. I know something about, like email marketing and authentication or, text messaging, but or podcasting, but
well,
there's so many areas like privacy law, man, that could be oof.
it broke my
There's a
brain
lot.
as well. I mean, I was just like, I
Thank
am
you. Thank you
so
for lying to me. That's very kind of you. So back to trademarks,
I'm just glad that there's people that do that specific thing, right? Um,
right? Me
it,
too.
it's yeah, and it's fascinating because the law people practice in more specific areas, and it's almost like they even get in subtopics of topics, right? I mean, there's intellectual property, and then there's patents, trademarks, and copyrights and trade secrets, and then even within trademarks, I noticed myself leaning towards more clearance and prosecution and not enforcement. So I guess that kind of is a little bit off of your
Well,
or
the lesson here for everyone listening is lawyers aren't lawyers. That it's not like a plumber where a plumber they can work in the kitchen, the bathroom, the
right.
garage. They can, and they're sort of our remodel plumbers and new install plumbers. There's commercial and residential, but more or less for most people, a plumber is just a plumber, and you don't need to know more than that. Are they licensed? You're fine. Don't worry
Yeah.
about it. And we take that mindset. Carpenter's a carpenter, a painter's a painter. We take that mindset to other professions. And sometimes it works, like for a lawnmower, and sometimes it doesn't, like for a lawyer, where if you
Yes.
ask a lawyer something that's outside of their scope, you might hear them say, you might ask a patent attorney about something having to do with patents, and they'll say, oh, that's outside of my scope. And you'll say, what in the world are you talking about? You're a freaking patent lawyer. And they say, oh, but I'm this kind of patent lawyer,
Right.
and you want that kind of patent lawyer, and you're going to pull your hair out unless you know it's coming. So part of what you're doing, Suzi,
That's
is helping us ask better questions at the start so we don't invest all this time, energy, and maybe money with somebody who actually is not the right kind of lawyer. We need to know so we can ask the right questions of the right person.
Yeah, and
That's a
it's so
sentence.
hard. Yeah, because sometimes you don't know what you don't know, right? And with patents,
Yeah.
there's patent attorneys that focus on electrical, pharmaceutical. So you're spot on about how even within patent law, there's specific areas. And don't get mad at your lawyer because they can't do that thing. They really want to help you, most likely, and refer you to the best resource, someone who can really help you with that specific question that you have.
Do you want to
But
hear a sad story?
I don't know. We're having such a great conversation and
No, you
well,
do. You do.
okay.
So my dad's an inventor, sort of, like a casual inventor. Do you know those wallets, the RFID blocking wallets?
Mhm.
So he was the first inventor of those.
Oh, that's
He
cool.
built it long before it was in stores. And then he came up with a name. He got a local manufacturer to build them. He came up with a design that was foolproof, didn't get to the place of patenting it or getting it into mass production, and sort of let the project die. It's sort of a hassle. He likes the inventing part, but the follow through, right, with the legal and the manufacturing is different. It's a different game. And then
Sure.
like 5 or 10 years later, finally they're REI. And we're like, yep, dad saw that that was the need for that. He built that a long time ago and got bored years and years before those people even thought of it.
Yeah.
But he didn't do the scaffolding around the business idea. And so, like, he gets credit for seeing the future a decade in advance, but he
That's
doesn't get the money from it because he didn't go through the trademarking, patenting, manufacturing, whatever process.
and I think you make a really good point there, Brian, that, when you're rolling out these new products, there's so many different areas to think about, right? Like there's so many intangibles that are eligible for protection especially like when you have a new product, like what you're talking about, like he invented it. You really need to have sort of a brand name for it and a generic name for it, because what will sometimes happen is that it will become commonly used and your brand name will become generic for that product.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, escalator was actually at one point a brand name, and it ultimately just became a generic use of a ascending stair, like electric ascending staircase. So just a heads up for people that are inventing brand new products, that in addition to the product itself, you need to coin the trademark and have some type of generic name for it. You need to have both of those.
Love it. So back to trademark. What are the questions
Okay.
that we should ask to make sure we're even talking to the right lawyer?
Oh, that's a great question. Do you mean in terms of?
Well, there's how do I know when I should start exploring things? And
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
once I've decided that I should start exploring things, besides typing in trademark lawyer into Google, what am I going to do to make sure I'm talking to the right person? I don't know how to vet a lawyer. If a
Sure.
friend of mine says, I use Bob over here and I liked Bob and Bob took care of me, that's fine. That's great.
Right.
Beyond that, Susie, I don't have a clue. Like, what am I going to go look at reviews? Maybe those are accurate. But
Yeah.
sometimes you choose highly reviewed people and they end up not doing a good job. And if it's having to do with my brand, then it's really important that there's a good job performed.
Sure. Okay. So there's a few different ways that you can go about it, and there's a few ways that I would be like, oh gosh, don't do that.
Oh yeah, start with the last ones. Tell us what not to do because we only have like 3 minutes left. Tell us what not to do
What
first.
not to do quickly. Yeah. So I would definitely avoid doing something like LegalZoom, right? Because you're kind of just duplicating efforts, and you're not really getting legal analysis from an attorney. I'd be very careful with using that. I would work directly with a lawyer. I would ask for a trusted referral from particularly a lawyer that you're already using in another area of your life.
Hmm.
And specifically say a trademark lawyer, right? I wouldn't say an intellectual property lawyer, because you might start going down the wrong path. And a lot of times, even other lawyers conflate intellectual property and, patents, trademarks, and copyrights, and will very well send you to, the patent lawyer who's doing pharmaceutical patents, and they're geniuses, don't get me wrong, but they don't understand the trademark intricacies.
Hmm.
I have to, discourage just random searching on the internet, because you may just get whoever's paying for SEO or doing a
Yeah.
really good job at SEO. Really, at the end of the day, I do think your best referrals are from the trusted lawyers that you're already using, business lawyers in particular. If you're using a big firm, like, a big law firm, to handle any of your other legal work, like, trust and estates or just general business law, they're likely going to have attorneys in-house who are very specific on the trademark work, and they should be, right? Because like we talked about earlier, all of this is complex and it's not getting any easier. Unfortunately, I swore like 10 years ago, Brian, I was like, trademarks are going to get easier, like, as I get more experienced.
But now you understand the nuance even more.
It's
Great.
right? Like, oh, as you get older, there's more that I don't know.
Yeah. I'm in the middle of this email training program right now that is getting into the depths of what is the current state of the art as we're recording this June 27th,
Yeah.
2022 on email authentication and email best practices. And if you were paying attention only 3 months ago, you might be painfully out of date
Mm.
today. And
Mm-hmm.
by the time this episode goes live, what I think is true right now, I will no longer think is true when this episode goes live. And it's maddening that these
Yeah.
fundamental building blocks of my profession, sending emails, keeps on changing more than once per year. And
Yeah.
yet that is the reality, and there's no appearance that it's going to slow down.
Everything, information moves so quickly now, and everything seems to be changing quickly, even in
Yeah.
the area of the law, which is historically,
Yeah.
based on precedent and is known to move so slowly. It's just hard keeping up sometimes with everything that's going on, and I think that's part of the reason we do keep specializing even further down,
Yeah.
in our specific practice areas.
Yeah. Well, Suzi, where can people go to connect with you and to ask you more about any of the topics and the great questions you've brought up in this episode?
Yeah, so I love talking about trademarks. I love talking about brand creation because I think that's really important too, to get it right at the beginning. And you can reach me or follow me on Instagram or Twitter. It's the same handle. It's Suzi Hixon, and it's SUZIHIXON. And you can connect me via DM, either one of those.
Wonderful. Suzi, thank you for being on Redbeard Radio.
Thank you so much for having me, Brian. This was fun.